If you work in enterprise security, then you're going to want to stick around for this video. We're going to be talking about SOC automation and trends in the security operations area and make some nice predictions about things that are coming in the next year. So if you work in this area of SOC and you really want to get a sense of how tools can help practitioners, stick around. I've got an expert here and I think you'll learn something. Hi, this is Ed Amoroso from TAG. I want to welcome you to our discussion today. We're going to be covering a whole range of different topics, including SOC automation. I've got my friend Mike Lyborg, who is the CISO for a very cool company called Swimlane. I know a lot of you watching are familiar with Swimlane, but we're going to ask Mike about his work as the CISO and his insight into this area. And the guy was a Marine, so he's going to give us a little bit of that experience. But Mike, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you, Ed.
You flew from one city to the next, so we've got you nice and fresh, I hope.
Yeah. No, I just left Denver this morning, and now I'm in Scottsdale. So I'm at the in-laws house here and enjoying much warmer weather.
Love.
But thank you for having me today,
Well,
Ed.
listen, before we get into the discussion, I want to get into this topic of automating SOC. Tell us real briefly, if people aren't as familiar with Swimlane as they should, what do you guys do? Give a brief summary.
Yeah, we started really to do a very brief summary. We started with that we were all banging our heads, right, in the security teams, and we were writing Python scripts and Bash and trying to automate things, but there wasn't really a good unified platform to do it all. So the founder of our company said, okay, enough of this. And we built a platform around automation, specifically tailored initially towards security teams. Now it's not only security teams, it's risk teams, it's business intelligence. So we kind of expanded outside of the security operations center, but the focal point is still on that analyst experience and then floating and disseminating information to all the different business units that are impacted.
I mean, the analyst is really where the tire hits the road in terms of day-to-day cybersecurity. There's no question about that. What's been kind of the role of the human versus, say, the use of tools and platforms? Do you see that as like something that the two complement each other right now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point because um, I don't think like AI is there yet, right?
Right.
When it's like we can just fire everybody and computers can run the world. That's not there yet. And we're always going to need people anyhow. So what I think is super important to always consider when we build out any kind of automation orchestration is like you have to answer why. What's the outcome? Like what are we trying to deliver? Are we trying to make the analyst's life easier? Are we trying to automate some reporting or shipping of data somewhere else? Like just like a broker, right? Um, so that's always the center focus. And since, like you said, the rubber meets the road with the analysts, they're the ones that are doing most of the work. Um, it's extremely important that they have, and we provide them with the ability to make it work for them.
Yeah.
So very flexible platform, right? We have to be able to present data depending on what delivery team we're working with. It's different if you're working with, the CI/CD, the DevOps teams, or if you're working with security analysts or vulnerability management or just IT ops or whoever is in the system. Everybody likes that separate and the kind of distinct look and feel. So that's part of our core tenets of what we do as well.
You know, you and I are both basically CISOs. That's our career. I'm wondering, this idea of automating security operations. I think a bunch of years ago, you and I both would be a little bit skeptical because it was kind of some of it was just writing dopey scripts. But tell me what you think right now. My instinct is just getting way better. But like, as a working CISO, to what degree do you depend on this? And maybe you can weave in some of the themes from Swimlane because you guys are in that business.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, well, I couldn't do what I'm doing today if it wasn't for
Right.
automation orchestration in general. It would be impossible. It was probably doable 10, 15 years ago when you had an antivirus tool or you had, a SIM or login facility, and you had people that were dedicated and designated to like this is what you do for a living.
Yeah.
That has obviously since changed, and now we have, instead of having 5 or 10 sources of information for every signal, we may have 50 to 100 depending on the size of the enterprise. So yeah, full stop. We can do what we're doing as a company if it wasn't for automation orchestration. And I think the most fun that I get to have as a CISO at Swimlane, right, is to go around the world and meet our customers and partners and then see what they're doing with automation orchestration. And then uh, obviously be honest enough with ourselves, like, uh, yeah, we need to go back and rethink how we're doing it. So I'm just a continuous learner, right, in this journey of trying to manage risk for our business and our customers.
I mean, you've gone from government to commercial, and you've probably
Um,
seen. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing you've seen an acceleration, right? And I mean, the threats used to be, they were more manual and slower, and all that stuff you just said, you could do that manually because you had time. I mean, I always did, but not nobody's time now is too fast. Like, is it? And maybe you stay in you guys certainly have a federal business. Do you see both in commercial and government that is that acceleration a common theme right now?
Yeah, from a delivery perspective as well, right? What are the expectations from our customers
Yeah.
and our government partners and everybody else? Is well, let's say it's vulnerability management, something trivial. They don't expect that to take years for you to fix, right? Like your SLAs and SLOs are critical. So if you're spending time or you're having teams dig really deep and then having to pivot between all these different platforms in order for you to get the information that you need in order to, resolve or patch the vulnerability, as an example, that you can't do it at the scale that we're doing with all the microservices and all the disparate application and components that are part of pretty much any enterprise nowadays. And it doesn't really matter if it's government or any kind of vertical or pillar. Um, Everybody's dealing with very similar problems, right? Is we need to do more with less, and we need to do it faster and cheaper.
And what advice would you have, like, for some of your peers, CISOs, who are I'm going to suggest that a lot of them are a little bit stuck in the mud in this area. Maybe there's some existing processes, some inertia, some budget challenges. Like, what should they do? Is this a time for them to try to make their case to management, to make an investment? Is there immediate ROI that shows up? What advice would you have? Because I know you and I both run around with a lot of CISOs, and some of them are in fact struggling, and they'd be saying, "Yeah, this all sounds great, Mike, but how do I move in that direction?" What do you usually tell them?
Yeah, it's often boils down to we don't know it all, so talk to your people.
Yeah,
And one thing that I've always said, right, is ask the team. It's like, what do you hate about your life? And if they say it's, hey, working in this ticketing system and playing whack-a-mole all day, then that's something you should probably address because happy people are better producers. They stay longer. And when you have a good solid culture where people enjoy doing investigations, right? Because to me, coming from the military, like I love the battle, right? And to me, every time we start seeing something, now when we go all in, right? That's fun. That's exciting. Um, to dig deeper, to figure out the who, what, when, where, and why. Um, that should be what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's really like nobody wants to type in tickets, right? And nobody wants to
right.
have 30 tabs in Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge or whatever it's called nowadays. You want to be efficient and get the information that you need in order to make a sound decision and assessment. And if you don't know how to do it, then look at the tools that you have in place to see how you can further tune and tweak them to make them better. And I think that's really important.
When you ask your team what's the worst thing in their life, you hope they don't say you, right?
Yeah, yeah. Now,
That's why I
I
would
mean,
never ask that question. I know not to ask that because I think my name would be the answer too many times.
Yeah, no, and I think holistically, right? It's culture is extremely important, and it should be fun, but it's also important to, you know, people need to be able to say no, and people need to also be able to say like, hey, have we thought about this? And yeah, it just security, cybersecurity, information security in general is really fun.
Yeah,
And I think if we start with that and we make everybody's experience as they show up to work, whether that's in office or remote, like be excited about what you're doing.
I
It
hear you.
is awesome, awesome what we get to see and the tech and the tooling and the velocity that our day to day is changing is amazing.
Now, Mike, you're a working practitioner day in, day out protecting stuff. When you hear AI, like you and I both see AI referenced and designated in almost every product.
Yeah.
What do you think is the right role in general, and also in the context of what we're talking about? I know at Swimlane you guys do use AI to assist the way you're automating operations. From a practitioner perspective, what do you think is the right way to think about this, and what's the right role for AI?
Yeah, something we did internally, right, and this was a couple of years ago, was, you know, we almost started with saying no to it initially as we were testing it, and we're like, well, that's not the right answer if you're looking at like generative AI. But more holistically at machine learning, like the needle in the haystack, and nowadays using generative AI to produce documents, maybe translate. Like a lot of our customers, they may have, you know, a SOC here in the US, one in Europe, somewhere else in Asia. So automatically translating uh, current working documents, incident response reports and write-ups, summaries, uh, those things are pretty easy to do using AI. And then also saying like, well, so what? And having access to that really large set of data is to me is very transformative. Um, but at the same time, test everything. Don't just trust it. Just like you don't go and hire a bunch of new people and it's like these guys, everybody knows exactly what to do, right? Like you have to evaluate all the
Right.
systems, the people, the technology, the process that you have in place. Um, so always focus on that and building in guardrails.
One thing your team has shown me that I thought was very impressive from a swim lane perspective is around task orchestration. Like I've seen you guys show how a task that I'm a process I always struggled with, this idea of how you orchestrate between tier one, tier three, day to day work activities and workflow. The whole orchestration of that in the early days, we would do that on a whiteboard. Just everybody look up at the white. I mean, it was really, really manual, very error prone. It was not that difficult to stray from the process because it was just sort of done manually. But I've seen that you guys have helped to pioneer making that a lot more structured, more automated, and hence a much more dependable and trusted task in the SOC. Is that something with your team? Do you see day to day orchestration of the work activity as an important function that could be automated?
Yeah, I think we talked about it. Like, there's not a there's not a silver bullet, right? Like, where do
Right,
you start in your
right,
journey? But I often go back to the basics. It's know your people, right? What's normal, know the devices and networks and data that they should have access to. Anything that's outside of that, you know, review it. So if we start with those just very, very basic things, even before AI, is looking at doing those whiteboard sessions. We still do them in our office. We go to the whiteboard and we're like, okay, it used to take us 6 hours to do this on average. In the last 2 years, we're now down to 1 hour. How do we get it down to 30 minutes of work, right? Or how do we fully automate it? And then whiteboard and sketch that out, and then rinse, repeat, test it, build it, validate it. And then often we may run that test cycle over maybe 6 months in order for us to, depending on the complexity, right? Some of these are they may take 30 minutes and you can save an hour almost immediately. So that's a quick return on investment. But every once in a while, you have these really complex use cases, and they may take multiple iterations. And I have OCD, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. So I sometimes have to say, like, hey, uh, it doesn't have to be perfect right now, because if you have 100 people in your SOC and you're saving 10 minutes a day per person, that's massive. And that probably means that those 100 people go home at the end of the day and they're far happier because they didn't have to do uh, that additional work. And when it comes to onboarding, so I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, right? Like, but onboarding people, new people, if these processes are automated and they're easy to visualize, now you have the ability to, in between investigations, extend their subject matter expertise and training, rather than saying, okay, as we hire you on day zero, here's your device. We're going to give you very little access initially, and then you're going to spend 6 months training and learning all of our systems. By the time they're done with that onboarding, often they might have ripped and replaced a EDR or a SIM or like some sort of tool in that stack, and they might have just wasted all the time rather than just saying, hey, this is how you manage our cases. And to your point earlier, here's, if you're tier one, let's escalate it to tier two and tier three, or let's get rid and elevate all the tier ones to tier two and tier three because they don't have to do that manual labor.
We're here chatting sort of on the cusp of entering 2025. I'm curious, what are some of the themes like when you sit with your team and you think, all right, here are some of the big things that are coming up, not just for your team, but your customers. Swimlane you sell to everyone, and you must be interacting with an awful lot of folks. When you put your ear to the tracks and listen, anything that you suspect will be important things for us to watch for as we enter the new year?
I think the continuation and acceleration of adoption of AI
Mhm.
is, I mean, so that's nothing
Across
new,
the whole business for all,
right?
yeah, I agree.
And this is more on my wish list, right? And that is the better fusion of risk, because every business unit manages risk very differently. And it's extremely difficult as a CISO, right? Whether you're an enterprise CISO or global CISO, you're a product vendor CISO. Um, you can try to do everything in order to impact all the business units, but you may not be able to impact that change, right? So gluing everything together and just managing risk from a holistic perspective, I think that's on everybody's roadmap, and I hope to see more of that in 25. Um, Automation when it comes to GRC programs is huge.
Hmm.
Faster and more efficient vulnerability management. Like there was just, I think everybody's seen in the news the last week of a company that's being actively exploited right now, right, globally, and how do we get that information and the resolution, and like remediation out to all affected parties
Hmm.
at a faster pace, things like that. But it's
Yeah.
still just the basics.
I love that you referenced this week somebody got hacked because we could run this video for a year and it would be true.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
almost doesn't
Unfortunately,
matter who we reference because, I mean, that's one of the things, Mike, that I feel hopefully automation will help with because in this industry, I think we haven't been as successful as I had hoped when I started doing this 40 years ago. I thought you put your nose to the ground in cybersecurity, we're going to get better. It seems like that hasn't happened. Maybe this the attackers are getting so darn good, but I'm very hopeful that with automated orchestration, much more intelligent SOCs, better tools for the analysts. I hope that these types of things allow us to start making up some ground because the last few years it hasn't gotten better. We see a greater gulf between offense and defense, and that's never good. You
no.
sort of want that to be the case. So.
Yeah, most of the time it comes down to velocity, right? Like how
Yes.
quickly can you, um, I mean, I hate to say it, everybody always talks about reactive and proactive in the last, what, 5 years,
Right.
like shift left. But if you shift left too hard and too fast, you're going to have a negative impact on business and
Right.
revenue streams. And now instead of having SOC team members that are not happy, now you're going to have other business units that are probably not happy because you're impeding them. So that balancing act of truly being more efficient and working at a much faster pace, that is paramount.
Mike, if people want to learn more about how they can benefit from Swimlane and SOC automation, is the website the best place for them to get a little bit more about the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Swimlane.com. We have a really large data set there of use cases, success stories, do's and don'ts, right? I hate to say it, but a lot of times I've learned the hard way of what not to do. Now, you don't repeat
You
those
and me
mistakes,
both, man. Yeah.
but that's the best way often of like, hey, we're not doing that again. That might have been too aggressive. So I think we try to share these lessons learned
Yeah.
and better practices rather than best practices because there isn't you can't cookie cut this. A process to you is different than a process to me and a process to somebody else. So you got to have to be able to have a flexible solution with people that understand that and listen and help you get the desired outcomes.
Well, listen, on behalf of my team at TAG and our whole sort of community and the people watching, I want to thank you, Mike, for making some time today. I hope some number of months out, let's get back together and reconnect and see how things are going.
Right back at you, Ed, and thank you for, as always, hosting us and having these conversations.
You bet. Thank you so much. And for everyone else watching, we'll see you next time.